why are we so disconnected spiritually?
Stress, anxiety, fear, distraction. What is keeping you disconnected?
We're running on survival hormones, right? We can't think about like enlightenment when you're getting chased by a tiger. That's just how our body is responding to this normal,
Dr. Stacy Barczak Baker guests on Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers to discuss the desire for better connection. It feels like we're all kind of like yearning for something more.
It is happening collectively. We're all on this journey to really be more in touch with ourselves and our true nature.
And the movement towards greater awareness.
This is a time for all of the healers and anyone who has that influence on people to really band together and raise that collectiveness. It feels like hope for a brighter future. It really does.
On an all-new Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers, a podcast dedicated to those seeking a more fulfilled and purposeful life through thought-provoking conversation, spiritual exploration, and authentic connections. The intentional movement has begun, and if you found yourself here, you are a part of it. Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers starts now. Hi, Dr. Stacy. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. I am so honored and excited to jump into a really juicy conversation today because I know you are a wealth of knowledge around mind, body, spirit connection. And that is one of the biggest parts of this podcast is combining that all so that we can live more authentically, truly understand our experience, and I think find our way through like all the ups and downs of life that we're going through. So welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
Well, we were talking just before we jumped on, and I know there's some big topics that I really, really, really would love to go over with you. But let's kind of start with you and your story and how you found yourself here on this path of the mind, body, spirit connection, the holistic medicine, the Ayurvedic medicine path, and start there. And then let's jump into some ideas of kind of like this whole missing link that I seem to keep coming across in the world of, in Western culture mainly, with this connection to spirituality and purpose and something more. Like it feels like we're all kind of like yearning for something more. But like, let's start how you got here.
Yeah, and you're so right. And there is such a disconnect right now, but every time there is something like this that's happening globally, there's also an expansion and an awareness that's happening. So we have to get to a certain point for people to really be asking for that, right? And so that's really important to kind of know. It is happening collectively. We're all on this journey to really be more in touch with ourselves and our true nature. For me, my journey has been, I'll just give you the express version of it. It goes back to, lifelong, just chronic infections, chronic issues, things like that, overuse of antibiotics, things that were affecting my microbiome that were causing really debilitating anxiety throughout all of my youth into my younger adulthood. And so for me, I was raised in a family of doctors. There was also a lot of trauma and stress from that, because when you're raised with two parents that know the absolute worst case scenario of every little thing that could happen, and they're telling you that, that to me would just fed that anxiety for me, right? And it just perpetuated it. And I really held on to it, and was really hard to disconnect from knowing the worst case scenario when you're already thinking that as an anxious person anyway. So that and lots of dental trauma, just kind of bombarded, right? And I was raised on a farm, which was beneficial in a lot of ways, but it also was sprayed with glyphosate. So I had that tremendous exposure. So just that. And then we trash our bodies in our 20s, or we're using other like alcohol and partying to distract from the anxiety and try to find yourself. And so a lot of that happened. My hormones were wrecked. My thyroid was wrecked. And then so finally it got to a point where I was just up against like all my options for healing were medications. And I was like, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel right. Something happened to create the situation. And so a few years later with the whole breast implant illness situation and things like that, that was kind of like my straw that broke the camel's back, was the breast implants, because my system was just so stressed and challenged, immune system, all those things. And so I finally came across functional medicine. I was already in school for, my doctorate in naturopathy. But then I finally discovered that part of it, which helped bridge the gap in this allopathic world that we live in, where we finally are getting tests that are telling us, like, yes, our symptoms are real. Like, it's not just saying, oh, you're good, right? You feel like death, but your labs are cool, so you're good.
Yeah.
So it was very empowering. And so the minute I came across that, I was like, okay, this is my path. This is my journey. I had to go through this so I could pave the way and make it easier for other women so that they don't have to live this as long as I have. So it's one of those things. Everything happens for a reason. And when I look back and I take a step back, instead of being like, why did this happen to me? I know exactly why my healing journey, led me to where I'm at.
Isn't that amazing how we are led through all these circumstances to lead us to our path and our purpose? I mean, I've done that in my own career of, television and communication, now finally understanding where it's all coming together for me to have this medium. But I mean, what is it about the world and culture? Because we are so prone to over medicating and just like the quick fix and things like that. Like, I personally have gone through functional medicine labs. I actually didn't get to go through everything and follow through with the treatments and things like that, because as life happens, and 2 kids, I didn't go all the way there. But even in that situation, I went through all the intakes, which is very intense. When you're going down that functional medicine path, it's a mind, body, spirit exploration.
Yes.
You talk about a lot more than just your physical health. And then you do all those tests. And, like for me, my labs came back and it was like, oh, you're perfect. But I know my body is telling me otherwise. Like, I know there's some issues.
Totally.
And I know a lot of it leads to anxiety, which is something a lot of people deal with. I'm medicated for that. Like you, I don't think it's something that I need to be medicated for our whole life. I don't think we are put here on this planet to have medication our entire life. So why do we find ourselves in these positions where we just say, okay, let's be medicated. Let's just take this pill. Or like, that is not how we were created, to put outside things into our body that are manufactured like that.
Because we live in a world that perpetuates the allopathic or the conventional model to say, hey, you can still hold on to the lifestyle that got you sick. Just take this pill and that's all you need to do. And honestly, I even see that happening with green medicine. A lot of functional medicine doctors are not addressing lifestyle, toxins, exposures, mindfulness, things like that. They're literally just prescribing supplements. And it's the same path, right? You're still not addressing the lifestyle that got you sick. Why are we in this epidemic where everyone is so disconnected? Because I truly believe the main cause of disease in the body is just disconnection, right? We're disconnected from our communities. We're disconnected from our own intuition because we are so constantly distracted by other people's opinions and emotions, and we're comparing, and it's just, we're overconsumed, right? Which causes more stress and anxiety, not just information, but things, right? We feel like, oh, well, if we're really taking happiness outside of us. And so we think, oh, if we just have this, then we'll be happy. Or we just do what this person did, we'll be happy. And then there's a lot of even chemical toxicities that are keeping us away from our spiritual connection. The pineal gland, which is our seat of our consciousness, is calcified by things like fluoride, which is added to our water system. Like, there's so many things that are working against us to keep us in this chronic state of distraction. And the only way we can really change our reality and really tune into our spirituality is by getting into the present moment. And everything in our society is keeping us from that.
But that's interesting that you just said that about like the fluoride, because I have really young kids, and you don't introduce that fluoride just as simple as that fluoride toothpaste
Mm-hmm.
until they hit, what is it, 2 is when they want you to start doing it. And then they ask you to start doing that. Why are we like prescribing this? Why are we telling people to do this? Because if you actually look back to it, when your kids are born, the way we treat them, and my husband and I actually had this conversation after we had our kids, because we had both of our children during COVID. During the whole, and we were in California during very big lockdowns. And so then, we were sitting in these positions. We started watching, I think, that Netflix documentary with, his name is escaping me now, but they go through all the blue zones and things like that and like do all the, Zac Efron. Yeah. With Zac Efron. And they go to all the blue zones and they explore like how these people are living their lives differently. And so we started actually looking and that's what sent me down the functional medicine path myself for stomach aches and headaches and things like that. And we started looking at all these things we put into ourselves. And then we took a step back. We started looking at things like Dr. Gundry and the plant paradox and what he teaches. And then we were looking at our children and we said, wow, why are we not treating ourselves like we treat a newborn baby? I know our nutrients need to change, but we are not introducing sugar. We're not introducing fluoride. We're not introducing, all these different things as adults that we're just like, oh, it's okay. When you hit 1, you can have it. But we are not born to utilize that. It doesn't serve us. So why wouldn't we treat ourselves as adults as we do our young children?
That, and then when you get even deeper into it, as your kids get older, you're like, why are they pushing all these things on this perfectly capable human body, right? And like, why are they telling you to introduce juice at 6 months, pure sugar?
Yeah.
Like, why are these things happening? Why is fluoride being pushed at 2? You know what I mean? Like, having kids was one of the biggest game changers for me because it really made me think about not just what I was putting in my body as I was growing them, but what am I putting in their body as far as organic food and, all of those things after the fact. And then you really start to understand how corrupt the food system is, our water supply, all of these things. It really does hit home. And some people don't think about that because they've been raised a certain way. And that's just how everybody did things until they actually have their own kids and their eyes, they open,
Why are we okay with that? How have we gotten so far away from that natural, from our natural resources, from what we naturally need to survive? Because it is, we are causing our own disease.
There are so many things that have increased, since we were born, right? With all of the media, we are one of 2 countries that actually allows commercials for pharmaceuticals. That's bizarre, right? But that's programming. It's all programming that's happening to us. And also how the food industry and the chemical industry are so intertwined and they're creating problems and fixing them with their miracle drugs. And so when you learn about how things are going and how we've just been so influenced, just like the got milk ads, right, that we had when we were younger. And then like beef is what's for dinner, right? That was what was being said, right? But now it's totally flipping. And so we're following these trends of what these industries are telling us. And it just seems natural because everybody's doing it.
So is it more like stop following the trends and start listening to ourselves?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. Yes. If everybody, and that's one of my main goals when I'm working with clients is to teach them how to be intuitive. Like they'll say, okay, well, I've done, my last practitioner told me to do this diet, but I feel like I'm not sleeping well or whatever it may be. I'm like, then listen to that. Your body knows, like it's telling you, don't just keep pushing, right? Don't keep trying the same thing if you know your mind and body aren't working together with it. So teaching them how to be intuitive and how to think for themselves is extremely powerful because we know our bodies better than anyone else. And so we have to know, what's going to be the best decision for us.
I think it's just so hard sometimes to trust ourselves because there are so many different voices out there, like you said. Even in my 20s, I went to a nutritionist who was prescribing me these I think it was like an HCG hormone shots to help me lose weight.
I did that too. I did that too. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It ruined me.
And it's like, yes. Where in my right mind do I think that, yes, I should give myself a shot of a hormone every single day,
literally,
and restrict myself to 1,200 calories in starvation. And this is going to create a healthy system for me. And I went there because, one, they were doctors and nurses that were telling me it was okay. And two, my mom actually introduced me to it. And of course, I'm going to trust my mom, and so we did it together. Like, we don't listen to ourselves. And there's so much about it. Like even with intermittent fasting, I've been reading these things, and I just heard a study about, if your A1C is at a certain level, that it doesn't actually work for you. Like, we are so individual as people. I know we are all connected as one, but our bodies work on such a unique, separate level that we can't just necessarily do what everyone else says, or what this doctor says, or what this nurse, like, it's really confusing and hard to understand what we are supposed to do. So how do we learn to actually trust what is right for us?
I tell people to unfollow anybody that's causing that mass confusion for them. Like, we have that gut instinct, right? We know that, if something's serving us or not. If something's giving you that feeling in the pit of your stomach that something's off and something's not right, then you have to trust that, right? And if you're watching someone who's evoking an emotion that makes you not feel good, or that completely... it's one thing to take in information and, try to learn from it, right? But it's another thing to, I always say, take in as much information as you can still maintain your peace, right? Because if it's creating aggravation and frustration in you, then it's too much information. We have stuff coming in from all different sources, and it's more than we can even mentally process. So sometimes the answer is here, right? And so tuning out, connecting with the present moment, practicing more mindfulness, I promise that will make your decision making that much easier, because you'll learn to trust your own intuition.
So how do we do that? Because practicing mindfulness, especially now with so much distraction, is hard. And I know it is very much talked about in the wellness community. Get present, have gratitude, be mindful. Great messages, great words. But in practical terms, in our everyday life, it is extremely hard. And in the culture that we are living in now, it is not practiced. It is not celebrated. I mean, it is a little bit more. I think it is more accepted now, but we're not living in like India where, they have ashrams and this and that, like, that's a way of life. Yeah. We have gotten so far away from having that as a way of life for us as a whole.
Yeah. We really need to take assessment, for one, of things that are actually draining. Like, we have to learn, like, is this draining me or is it giving me energy? All the activities that we're taking, all the things we put our kids into, like, are those actually serving us, or are they draining us? And our influences, whether it's our television or our podcast or, social media, anything like that. But the way that I teach people to start incorporating this daily is I kind of break it down from more of a neurochemical standpoint, where our brainwaves are most influenced the hour we wake up and the hour right before we go to bed. We're in kind of like a theta brainwave pattern, and we are the most suggestible. But think about it this way. That's when people are mostly going to get on their devices, right? And they're going to scroll, and they're going to and then that can really translate into an addiction, right? We become addicted to these stress hormones that are being evoked from all of these things that we're seeing outside of us. And so if we can use that hour in the morning to practice gratitude, to set intentions for the day, to do something positive, just leave the devices away for at least the first hour, right? Pour into yourself and and then you can, on a chemical basis, you can lower your cortisol, you can boost your dopamine by practicing that gratitude list. You can set yourself up for success just taking that first hour of the day before you get into your stressful day. But I think the healthier and more connected you feel, the less of those things you're going to take on, because you're going to know how much they're actually draining you. And you're really you're going to take in things that just pour into you and give you energy.
I absolutely love that. It's something that I've been really wanting to do. But as a mom with young kids, I have
Mm-hmm.
my monitor on my phone. It's right next to
Mm-hmm.
my bed. It's on
Mm-hmm.
all night because, I need to hear if I need to go take care of them. I actually said that to my husband this week. I was like, I need to find a way that I can hear the kids and put the phone in another room or in the bathroom
Mm-hmm.
some way,
Yes.
because I know that I am addicted to grabbing that first thing in the morning, going on social media, looking at my emails, and it is not serving me well. It is not setting me up well for my day, and going to
Mm-hmm.
bed at night. I do the same thing. How do we actually get to the point where we break those patterns? Because like logically, I know. And that's, I think, that we do come against a lot of resistance when we logically know something, but we
Mm-hmm.
physically have to get to the point of doing it.
Well, and a lot of that perpetuates, like I said, that addiction. A lot of us are up against an addiction to stress that if we don't have that, we don't feel alive. And so
Mm,
as we have these floods of stress hormones coming in from these hits of instant gratification or dopamine or,
yeah.
whatever we're seeing on social media, those we make more receptors for those stress hormones and those stress chemicals. So we get into a situation where we need more and more of those. And then we have like reality TV and
Mm,
crime TV and all of these things that are filling that void
yeah.
all day long. And so one of the things, we have to change that neurocircuitry, and so that's why I'm saying
Mm,
that first hour in the morning is our power hour, just knowing that, and then starting to bring awareness to how you feel. Like, let's just say you're not doing your morning routine every day, but let's just say you've
mm-hmm.
incorporated it a few days a week. You look at the difference of how much more grounded you are, how more
Yeah.
resilient to stress you are, how more stable your blood sugar is, and how you're less likely to pick up the device just because you're bored. And if you start noticing the positive effects of that, that is going to encourage you to do it more and more.
Mm. I mean, I do think it's really interesting what you were saying, how we are addicted to these things like stress, or it almost creates that adrenaline. And I think there's a lot of it that comes with this whole concept that I've spoken about, is wanting to change. Like, we are actually more like we're okay creating more of whatever's stressing us out, or the hardship that we're living in, because we know it, because
Mm-hmm.
accepting change to do something better or feel better is an unknown. So our body naturally gravitates to what we know, which for a lot of us is stress, anxiety, those ups and downs, not feeling good. And so then we don't want to actually make those changes because that's what we're comfortable and familiar with.
Well, and that's so important that you bring that up, because it all goes back to that concept of survival mode, right? That we're all stuck in this
Mm,
chronic state of survival. And when you're in survival mode, you tag anything out of that comfort zone, even if comfort zone is completely dysfunctional, anything out of
yeah.
that is going to be tagged as a threat. So any sort of change or
Mm,
shift in your routine is going to be tagged as an immediate threat. And that's a primal instinct that's happening. So it really does take a lot of consistency to build that stress adaptation back, that resilience to stress, to calm the body, right? And say, look, I'm safe. I've
mm,
got you. This changes for us. Like, we're going to work together. It's going to be great. But it's disconnecting, because the body's going to fight back hard through the chemicals and the hormones and all of those things. So it really is just kind of, being consistent in a way that you're just creating a new response and new, patterns.
Well, as you're saying this, I was starting to think, is like, are we as a whole, like, as society, stuck in that fight or flight?
I would say, Dr. Joe Dispenza has done so many studies on this, and he says over
Mm-hmm.
70% of us are stuck in survival.
Mm,
Collectively, globally. I mean, that is and that too, right there. Why are we so disconnected spiritually? Because
mm-hmm.
we're running on survival hormones, right? We can't think about like enlightenment when you're getting chased by a tiger. That's just how our body is responding to this normal.
Well, and if we are all one and we all have this mass consciousness, and and 70% of us are there, I mean, that's going to be a big push for anyone to overcome that, not only on an individual level, but as a global or on a bigger scale. Because if we are all putting that energy out into the world, are we all kind of like latching onto it? So how do we start to shift that?
I think, and I've learned through lots of spiritual teachers that one person who is tuned in spiritually with their own intuition is more powerful than millions who are not. And I think this is really a time, 1,000,000%. And I think this is a time that there is such an awareness and a need for this, that the people who are realizing that they're kind of picking up the slack for the population who's not, right? And they're spreading that love and that mass consciousness, whether we realize it or not, they're finding that balance, right? And we're practicing what we preach, and we're leading by example. And that's really the only way. You can't force someone into this, you can't force them into, really any sort of change, as we know, because they're tagging that as a threat. So it truly is just leading by example. And this is a time for all of the healers and anyone who has that influence on people to really band together and raise that collectiveness.
Do you see that happening more? Do you see more people stepping into their power?
I do. I really do. I feel it so on such a level. Yes.
What does that feel like? I mean, what does that feel like to step into that collective consciousness and that awakening and awareness? When the familiar is this fight or flight, like how does that feel?
Honestly, it feels like hope. It feels like pure love. It feels like having empathy for people who are stuck and understanding why they're stuck, because we were once there too. You know what I mean? It really is a kind of deeper understanding of why people do what they do, understanding and being compassionate. And that too, it's all based on love, right? It's love for all the things around us, all of the different parts of everyone. We're all here for a reason, and we're all here to just uplift and expand. And so when you start to be aware of all the people that are doing that, it feels like hope for a brighter future. It really does.
Is this the rising of the divine feminine, or is that why we're seeing so much aggression and pushback in that egotistical world that's just trying to keep its hold on us versus, allowing this love and empathy and hope to come through?
I don't know if that's like, I don't know how I would label it. As far as like divine feminine, or that I think we all have this internal, we're driven by the ego, right? We're all trying to, all we're trying to do is disconnect from it, right? And a lot of people aren't even aware of that disconnection or the non-attachment and so there's so many things in our lifestyles that are perpetuating the ego, and with what we normalize in society, that of course that's going to take a toll on any sort of awakening or spiritual growth. And I wonder too, like, I know this is what we're all going through collectively, but I wonder how many phases of this have been in the past where, this traumatic event happens and people are mass aware of it and just pouring in and just trying to make the world a better place. It's probably happened so many times over history.
I mean, yeah, history, definitely. We can look back and see how it repeats itself, but we are finding ourselves right now in a lot of turmoil. We're up against a lot of aggression, a lot of fear. That is being pumped into the atmosphere every day. I mean, whatever we're seeing on the news, I used to be a news junkie watching it 24/7, and I've stepped back because it's like, this is not good for me or my energy. Do I want to be aware of what's going on in the world? 1,000%. But we do need to be mindful of what those things we are taking in so that we are not contributing to it as well. But I mean, it is still felt. It is still felt everywhere we go. So I wonder if, and it seems to be getting stronger. There seems to be these really, really horrific things that are happening that are bringing our attention and our awareness to that ego, to that disconnect, to that ugliness that is here. And I wonder if that is actually an effect of the rise in consciousness and awareness, because, as anything is fading away or losing its power or losing its hold, it's going to come back and fight harder. So I wonder if we're seeing that now.
That totally makes sense. I mean, it is, the whole fear concept just perpetuates that survival mode even more, right? Because then you have people making decisions out of fear of death, fear of losing their money, fear of disease, all of these things. They're just perpetuating that and keeping people stuck in survival because of what's being put out in the media. And when you're making a survival-based decision, you're only going to be focused on your body, how things affect you, right? Not the collective, and very just primitive decision making. And that's why stepping out of survival, looking at your influences, how they're making you feel emotion, and disconnecting from that is going to make you have more conscious decisions, right? And more like, how do we affect everyone? How can we be empathetic in our decision making and make decisions more from our intuition perspective versus a just right now, how do things affect me? I'm just trying to survive mechanism.
Well, and it also sounds like what we're talking about is it's actually really rudimentary on both levels, on the bigger scale and on the simpler. Like fight or flight is so basic, taking care of ourselves is so basic. These are all actually basic things, whether it is falling into that fear-based, I got to survive this moment situation, or if it's like, I need to listen to my body and take care of myself and drink more water. Like they are both, all of these are fundamentally basic things that we need to do, but we complicate it so much.
So much.
How do we uncomplicate it? Or are we complicating it because it's money? Are we complicating it because if we make it complicated, there's more financial success for whoever solves that problem? Like you said, that we're creating the problem so we can solve the problem.
Yep. That's a huge, huge factor in it. And like I said, even with the natural medicine, I see so much of that, just like, you have this, just take this supplement. Like, don't worry about fixing your insulin or your cortisol. Like, just take this supplement. You'll be fine. We see so much of that. And I think the mass confusion, it impairs our own judgment and our own intuition even more. And these are people that we trust, right? Because we think we know them on social media. They check all the boxes, but and that causes even more confusion because we're like, gosh, we trust them and we believe them. We've tried everything this other practitioner said. That didn't really get there. And so it's, and I always go back to, why aren't we talking about the true healers, like sunshine, gratitude, time in nature, all of those things, mindfulness, because you can't bottle them up and sell them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is exactly what I'm thinking is like, we cannot, sunshine is free. Walking barefoot outside is free. Probiotics, you have to pay for them. But, from what I've read is like, we all don't need all those probiotics. They're actually not serving they're different people are deficient in different things. And I forget what it was, what I was talking about is like, a lot of the times, like what we're missing is like B12. And where do we get B12? Is that, I'm not positive, you're the doctor, but are we getting that from the sun?
B12 typically is what we're going to get from animal products, which is another thing. Yeah. So vitamin D is what we get from the sun that synthesizes.
Vitamin D. There we go.
But vitamin D also is going to be what synthesizes all of our hormones and regulates our melatonin and serotonin and all of these things. So it's so much more than just getting that vitamin D level correct. It is the hormone, which vitamin D is a hormone that synthesizes and balances all of the other hormones in our body. And so it's just like there's so much fear around the sun. And I wonder how much of that is an agenda because they know that that's going to help that individual regulate so much inflammation in their body, their blood sugar, like all of these other hormones, their neurotransmitters, so you do wonder, but I never focus on what these other industries are doing because I think the more you focus on the problem, the more you bring attention to the problem. Everything is going to grow the more you put attention on it. So I always try to shift it and put attention on the solution. And so even being in that mindset, because it's very easy to get sucked in fear of the food industry, the water supply, all of these things, but you can't you can't stay in that chronic state of fear, even if you're worried about good things. You know what I mean? Like, you have to just focus on the solution, get your own body and your own intuition in check, and the rest will follow.
So what is the solution? Is it getting outside more? Is it getting away from the screens? Is it connecting with our community? Like, what are the biggest things that we can do to start to put ourselves back on that path to wholeness?
Yeah, totally. I think that, like I said, disconnect is one of the main reasons as to why we get into these chronic states of disease and dysfunction. So I think very much setting boundaries for devices has got to be part of the plan, right? It has to be, especially that first hour in the morning, that first hour before bed. Those really have to be mitigated as much as possible. Really start to notice, like, if I watch a drama anymore on TV, I'll have bad dreams. I'll feel really kind of like in a dark place the next day. There's noticeable effects that happen when I watch. And so I just don't even watch it anymore. I know that it's going to affect my mindset, my sleep. And maybe so many people, that's just their normal. They don't really make that connection. But starting to be aware of how you feel, or how people on Instagram are making you feel. If they're making you feel like you're not doing enough, or you're not worthy, or whatever it may be, then mute them or unfollow them. Just really setting your boundaries with society. And that goes into people pleasing, right? Which is a trauma response when we're over pleasing everybody else. And so it truly is about the more we can pour, without sounding too selfish, but the more we can really pour into ourselves, because I truly believe that we are all good intention people. We are all based out of love. We were created with love. And so if we can really get back to our true nature, that will be contagious like a wildfire, And so anything that's keeping you distracted, if it's consumerism, we all have our vices, right? Whatever's keeping you distracted, is it alcohol or other substances? Truly noting and working with those, and and just trying to get to that place of balance. And if you, like I said, you start your day off there, then the rest of your day is that's like your baseline for what you're going to accept the rest of your day. So really just the power of that morning routine is so intense.
I mean, everything that you just mentioned, though, as our addictions or our vices, are things outside of us. If you really look at it, it's everything is outside of us. What is causing us our disease? What is causing us our discomfort? What is causing our anxiety or our traumas? All of these different things are things outside of us. So it's really about coming back within. And I think, especially in our culture, we have really gotten away from that. We don't value that going within moment. We just look outside of us for everything. I mean, dealing with things like anxiety is looking outside of yourself. People pleasing is looking outside of yourself. All these traumas that are such hot topics right now, narcissism, like everything is about what is outside of us. And we've fallen so victim to that. And is it because of technology and the culture, or is it just because of what we value where we live, where we are in the world?
I think it does have, a lot to do with self-worth and self-value, and the implications that we think like brings us self-value, if it's followers or likes or having things or whatever that may be. But like you said, those are all external sources. And I think the more you can learn to love yourself and really, hone in on some of those, because we're searching for those things outside of us because there's something that's unsettled within us, right? Or that we feel like we're not enough or we're not worthy. And I think that social media perpetuates that, right? We have filters, we have people putting their highlight reels up. It's not real life, And so that makes us feel even more like it's that affirmation of like, oh yeah, like I do suck. I'm not worthy, whatever. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not, and so when we're constantly reminded that and then media and, things like the Kardashians, right? Who they're, there's unrealistic expectations, and we are holding ourselves to that, which is completely like, it doesn't even make sense. But we think that holds the key to our happiness, or that weight loss will hold the key to our happiness, or whatever it is. But the more you can really learn to like spend time with yourself and learn to love yourself and connect with yourself and know that, your creation wasn't a mistake. You're not made to fit in. You're made to stand out, right? You're made to be your own individual. The more we can connect with that, just think about how many more gifts we could bring to the world if we are actually just practicing where like our passion, our dharma, like why we are here versus what the other person's doing that we want.
Well, we are a society and a culture, and I don't know where we switched over to this, lacking in self-worth as a whole. It's almost like you could say it's an epidemic, and I don't know at what point we transitioned from that, like, or what the cause was. Do you have any ideas of like, you know, is it, you know, did we switch over in the 50s? Was it, you know, like at what point did we cross over to not valuing our own self, not loving ourselves, and to this constant seeking of outer validation?
You know, I can think about my parents' generation because that's as old as I know, you know, or even my grandparents. And they were definitely not told to pour into themselves. You know, they were back then, you sacrificed, you stuck with a job for 50 years, even if it sucked, because that's just what you did, right? And you sacrificed, you scraped and saved. And there was no self-care. I mean, my mom raised 6 children. There was no self-care. There was no pouring into herself, you know, and that was just normal. Like you and to me, looking back now, like I am a mother and I can't imagine if I didn't pour into myself, I would be a terrible mother. Like I know that I would be, because I wouldn't have any mental space. I wouldn't have any clarity. I wouldn't have any, just like, I wouldn't have any proper stress response. I would just be constantly on edge. And I have felt that when my kids were really little. That's when I was healing. And I know what that feels like. I can't imagine what that would feel like. But that was what was normalized. And I don't know what really caused that other than just the previous generation who were living through the wars. And they're just thankful to be alive, right? And they're just, you know, is full on survival mode, truly, right? Because they actually were surviving wars and that sort of thing. And so I think with that, and just, you know, you think about how our school system has shifted and, you know, that was taken over by, you know, lots of higher up people. And so then we're being trained to be in jobs that may or may not mesh with our purpose or our passion, right? And so that's training starts young. It starts in our schools. It's institutionalization. And so we're trained to sit in a desk all day long doing something we don't want to do, to get a job sitting in a desk all day long doing something we don't want to do until we retire and then live our life. And that's just what's normalized. Yeah.
It's just been systematic. I mean, I did hear when you were talking about that and talking about the different generations, I remember a conversation I had with a friend's grandparents, and they said, you know, now they're very religious. And I think there's a difference between religion and spirituality and being spiritual.
I do too.
This woman said, you know, we have all gotten so far away from faith and from something bigger in the home. And I think, to me, that is also one of the missing pieces is like you said, you know, we are so trained. This is what you do. This is how you sacrifice. This is, you know, but we've gotten away from those things. Like you said, like, what are we here to do? Like, what is our purpose? And it doesn't have to be like a big thing. Maybe we're here to bring laughter, you know, maybe we're here to bring joy. It doesn't mean that we're all here to quote unquote, save the world and cure hunger, you know, I mean, but just by following our passions and our pleasures and the things that really light us up in life will, like you said, help change the world. And maybe that helps bring us out of the looking outside of us and brings us maybe back within. I'm spitballing here. I don't know, because this is a question I've been contemplating a lot, and I ask a lot of people.
I think so. And I think that recognizing this as adults, so that we can teach our children to do more of what, and so we can notice in our children, like how to pour into their talents and their gifts and their passions more, instead of just putting them in an institution and memorizing facts, which is something that disconnects them from their true purpose.
Yes. I mean, even the whole concept is like, you know, we grew up in a time where it was like, you go to school and then you had to go to college to get a good job. Like literally.
Totally.
I mean,
yes.
And I went to college. I wanted to go to school. I was the first person in my family to go to a 4-year school and graduate, you know, and it was like, this is amazing. But I don't, even being that, I don't think every college is for everyone. I don't think the school system is actually designed properly, like you said, to bring about the people that we need in this world. Like, we all have our own path and we all have our own journey. And just like our health, I don't think education is one size fits all.
Totally. It is absolutely not. And that was one thing that your children are young, but as you start to put them in school, you're really going to have, you'll just like you had with the food and all the toxins and all that stuff, you're going to have another almost spiritual awakening. And I had been through that with my own kids. We did Montessori, then we were thrust into traditional over COVID. And then I just saw their light just dimming as they were in this traditional model. And so I was like, all right, we're homeschooling. We're going to homeschool. Really? I'm going to learn to pour it. Yeah. And they go to a hybrid program a couple days a week, and they are literally outside in nature all day long. And they do hand work, whether it's felting or needlework or whatever it is, because that's what perpetuates that mind-body connection, helps them learn. Mm-hmm. And it is just the most beautiful concept. But I would have never thought to make that shift if I wouldn't have seen how they were in a traditional model, right? And I saw the contrast and the difference. And sometimes we have to feel that to know when to make our next move. Everything happens for a reason.
I mean, that is so true. I think the school system, and it's not about teachers, it's just the way that it has been created. It does. It dims what you said, how it dims the light. Like, we do that to our own children. And I've talked about this so much. Our children come in so connected already, so intuitive. They are so close to source. And we all are connected. We all have the power of our intuition. But it's as we go through life, that light gets dimmed. And then we reach our 30s or our 40s, and something major usually happens in our life. And then we go through this big awakening where we start questioning things like, what if we can stop that? What if our children don't have to have an awakening or a midlife crisis or something that happens in their 30s where they have to go question and explore everything? What if we can nurture them when they're young so that light does not get darkened?
Absolutely. And that's kind of what my goal as their, I've kind of looked at my role as a parent as, I was raised in a very militant household. There were 6 of us, of course we were Roman Catholic. All the ducks were in a row, it was a very religious, very militant type of, and that was just all they knew. That was what they were modeled from their parents. And so for me, I'm like, the only way. And I always tell my husband too, because he gets all bent out of shape about what's happening in the world. And I always tell him, like, look, the only way we can change this is how we change ourselves and how we change what's in our home, how we influence our children, how we model behavior so that they, can really tune into their own intuition and their own guidance. Because like you said, they are so much more connected than we are. And who are we to tell them, oh no, but if you look at the normal model of events, most people are modeling them going to a 9-to-5 that they hate, right? Coming home miserable. And the kids are miserable. They've been at school all day, which they didn't like. And so we are perpetuating that model for them by modeling. Kids don't listen, they imitate, right? And they're being thrust into that earlier and earlier. And so the only way we change things is to just break the cycle within us, and then how we model that behavior to our children.
So do you like the approach that you have now with the hybrid and more of the hands-on learning versus and do you think that's kind of the way the school system, I mean, there is a need for traditional schooling. You want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer. There are things that you need to do. And I'm not saying that that's not right. My daughter goes to Christian preschool. Like when we toured it, like I love her school. I love the community about it. And when we toured it, the headmaster said to us, there's 2 things your daughter's going to learn here. She's going to learn to love school, and she's going to learn to love Jesus. And like literally, and we're not like a super religious family. We're a spiritual family. We laugh because she wakes up singing the song like God loves me just the way I am. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's hilarious. We're like, she's learning this in school, and she loves school. So it's not like I want to take her out of it. And she's learning so much. But like, I do get to the point where I'm like, okay, in like a year and a half and 2 years, she's going to be going to the traditional school system. And like, what does that look like? And it's something that I've been questioning quite a bit.
And you're so tuned in, and it sounds like you're really aware of your children's needs and things too. Like you'll know when to shift. Like I was 2 years to a traditional model with my kids before I was like, this is not what I want. This is not what they want. And so, we have to experience these things to know when to shift. And I would never, judge a parent for putting a child in a traditional model. I mean, I was in private schooling my whole life. I went through way more college than I should have. But that's just was my learning process. Right. And, with degree shifts and all of those things, but they all shaped who I am now. And I'm fine with that. But should everybody homeschool? No, because some parents don't want to do it, can't do it because they're working their jobs and things like that. So it's not for everyone. But I think tuning into your children and learning what they need. And even if you can, if they're at a traditional school, but you're teaching them the lifestyle at home, right? You're balancing that out. That's going to be more important than anything. But I think one of the things that really got, me thinking was my daughter had told me one time I had picked her up from school and she's like, I see my teacher more than I see you.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, like that breaks your heart as a parent, especially because I stayed home with them until they started school. Right. So I stayed home with them. Right. I had devoted the first 4 or 5 years of, their lives and raising them and keeping them home with me. Yeah. And to hear that, I'm like, why am I doing this? That's not what I want as a parent. That's not what I want. Some people, like I said, they are better parents if they have that, distance and separation a little bit. And so it truly is just knowing what you need to be the best parent and knowing what your kids need. That is the most powerful thing. And then you can make the decisions and the shifts as you go.
Well, I mean, and that's even with your children or your spouse or anyone in your life.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many of us that are dedicating so much of who we are to outside of our own core family that we are spending more time. I mean, I know there's been studies and work and people have talked about that a lot. Like you spend more of your time at your work or you spend more of your time away, like you said, away from your children than you do these people who you say you're doing it all for and you love. And what we all really want is we're coming back full circle to that. We want each other's presence. We want to be present in the moment with the people we love most. And so by coming back there, that's where it all starts.
And that too brings us full circle to that whole self-worth, right? Like, did you have people pouring into you and really being aware of your needs as a child? Like my parents gave me what I needed on, as far as like food and shelter and things like that. But with a huge family, was I really poured into and told that like I was such a light and I had such gifts to share to the world? Like, that's probably one aspect of why we are searching for this self-worth outside of us, because it wasn't necessarily, and I'm not saying they didn't know better because they weren't poured into as children either, and so we can we're only as good as like what we can like replicate and mimic. Right. And so I never blame my parents because it's all brought me full circle to where the awareness that I'm at now. Yeah. But that I think is a huge missing piece. Right. And so if we can pour into our children with love, noticing their talents, noticing their needs, that self-worth concept probably won't be there for them.
Yeah. And I think where that whole conversation comes up about, generational trauma or generational curses, because I try and think about it that same way is like, whatever I feel like I was lacking in whichever way, like I had great parents that poured into me everything they could, and they were very present and things like that. But then, whatever issues I may have, I try to bring it back to the fact that, they were doing the best they could with what they had. Like these issues probably stemmed from the way they were parented. And then before that and before that. So like this goes way far back. So when we talk about being cycle breakers and changers now, it's because we're reaching this time where we are becoming more consciously aware, like we talked about, and it is time to break those cycles so that hopefully our children will move forward for their children in a better way. And it's not to say that everyone that came before us was bad. It's just like, okay, this stops now. Let's move forward and let's create a better world.
that's how we grow and learn and expand, right? Is because, like I said, the duality, we have to feel the duality and the contrast of what we don't want and make our shifts. The worst thing we could do is just keep replicating that same pattern because we know it's not working, And so, and that's the definition of insanity, right? Keep trying the same thing and expect a different result. And so we know better. We know we have the power to choose differently. So it's just kind of coming into your own power and making those decisions, even if they are making you feel a little uneasy. Those are the best decisions, right? Because it's telling you that you're doing something unknown, but that's going to create a new situation for you.
Mm-hmm. And it's taking responsibility for your actions in doing that, which is, I think, maybe even harder than stepping into an unknown is when you're stepping into that unknown, when you're starting to listen to your intuition, when you're starting to change direction, that means you have to take responsibility for what comes after it. And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes.
It really is. Yeah. It's easier to just continue the same thing you were doing, right? It's comfortable. It's known. Yeah.
Completely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Stacy. How do we work with you? How do we go through your program? How do we find you and follow along with all of your great information?
Yeah, thank you so much. So I spend most of my efforts on Instagram. So at dr.stacy.nd is my handle. And then I do have my own podcast, Vibing Well with Dr. Stacy. It's just a solo podcast. I kind of go over, I get lots of collective inquiries about, we're all going through things at the same time. So I just kind of focus on those topics that are really coming to the surface for everybody. And I am in the process of writing a book. I expect it to be out next year. So that's kind of what I'm working on right now and how you can reach me. So
wonderful. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. I just loved everything about our conversation and all the wonderful information that you have. And hopefully, together we could really all start making these individual changes in our life so that things do look brighter, so that there is that hope you talked about.
I love it. Thank you so much.
And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Dr. Stacy Barczak Baker, for joining me in such a great conversation about listening to ourselves, listening to our body, and noticing that light that we all have within us that can help spread hope and love throughout the world. Also, seeing it in our children because they are the real change makers. It starts with us, but it will end with them. If you want to work with Dr. Stacy, I'll put all the information of how to get in touch with her in the show notes below. And as always, you can find Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers and Intentional Media on our website at CourtneyMyers.com, where you'll find books, courses, and everything else we have going on. Can't wait to talk to you again soon. Bye.